is time for the Republican Party to coalesce around our nominee.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go.
We're building product here and shipping it overseas. Buy America and build America.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Donald Trump and Richard Nixon both won the New Hampshire primary 3 times, the only Republicans ever to do that. Trump is by far the only Republican to win New Hampshire 3 times consecutively. Nixon won 1960, 68, 72. Joe Biden and Lyndon Johnson. They're the only presidents to win the New Hampshire primary as write-in candidates. Biden won big last night. His margin of victory, more than 35 points. Johnson won narrowly. His margin of victory, 8 points over Senator Eugene McCarthy. That small victory and McCarthy's anti-Johnson issue, the war in Vietnam, ended Johnson's quest for re-election. Biden feels no such pressure. He and Trump, for possibly one day and one day only, have something in common. They both believe New Hampshire has ended the battle for the nomination, and thus the general election has begun. They have history behind them, and these are nothing if not historic times. However, Nikki Haley has some history on her side, too. She has already won more delegates than any woman to seek the Republican nomination. And she wants this race to continue, vowing to challenge Trump for the next 4 weeks in a state he has remade in his, not Haley's, political image, South Carolina. And that is where we begin. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, tell us about South Carolina and what awaits Trump and Haley.
Hey there, Major. So let's continue this idea of learning from the past to talk about the future. I'm going to show you the map of the 2016, 8 years ago, 2016 Republican primary there, where Donald Trump really took off, won big, but it was a fractured field. And this is important because you might imagine that the part of the party which supported Donald Trump at the time also supported Ted Cruz at the time, and frankly, they did well in about the same areas geographically, might be one part that he would do well with today. But then there was the Marco Rubio vote, a little bit more for Jeb Bush, a little bit for John Kasich. Maybe we'll watch if Nikki Haley maps onto their votes as well. But overall, you see a pretty dominant win for Trump. And this I want to show you, which is the attitudinal part. Donald Trump back in 2016 won voters who were looking for someone who could bring change. He dominated among voters who said they thought he could tell it like it is. Well, he's very much consolidated that part of the party now, and we learned that because these things were reflected again last night in New Hampshire. For Haley, I think the question is, can she cut in to some of that change, some of that upend the system, fights for me, attitudinal questions that we're going to see going forward into South Carolina?
Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins us now here at the table. Robert, picking up on that point from Anthony about Haley needs to add to what she has. And one of those things that she needs to add to is the sense that she's not part of the establishment. One of the things she said last night was the establishment's coalescing around Trump. I'm anti-establishment. She's trying to make a bid in that direction, among many other places. Still, though, a very tall order.
I've been making calls in the last few hours after we got back from New Hampshire, and it's clear to me that donors are wary. They're not sure she really has a viable path. A month is a lifetime in politics. No doubt. And she's getting pressure implicitly from many aspects of the party that this race is over. The fact that so many senators who don't like Trump, so many House members who don't like Trump are not rushing now to the political barricades to say, we're with Nikki Haley. Their lack of action speaks volumes.
And is there a way for Nikki Haley to say, whether donors are with me or not, I can light a fire among small dollar donors? Or is that a place that Trump not only owns but occupies?
As I talk to Haley's allies and her advisors and her supporters, it's evident to me that she's not really trying to build momentum only on finances and on politics, but she's trying to make a new argument that Trump's vulnerable. And she hopes that eventually the burden of that argument is on Trump's shoulders and collapses his candidacy. It seems like if she stays in, which is still a big if, of course, she's making a long-term play that ultimately he's weighed down by everything.
Rob, let's talk about this question of vulnerability and something that Ron DeSantis recently out of this campaign and a recent endorsee of the former president, said on Steve Deace's podcast. Let's listen.
When I have people come up to me who voted for Reagan in 76 and have been conservative their whole life, say that they don't want to vote for Trump again, that's a problem. So he's got to figure out a way to solve that. I think there's an enthusiasm problem overall. And then I also just think there's some voters that have checked out at this point that you got to find a way to get them back.
Reagan, Republicans out, enthusiasm problem, check out problem. What do you make of what Governor DeSantis just said? What
Governor DeSantis articulated is something you hear from other traditional Republicans, traditional conservatives.
But he's not a traditional Republican.
He's not. But he comes out of the more traditional mold in terms of his libertarian leanings on a lot of things that molded with Trumpism, and he embraced Trump because Trump was the person of the moment in Republican politics. But DeSantis really sees himself as more of a conservative than a populist first. And Trump, DeSantis, his time in the House, he was more of a Paul Ryan Republican in terms of how he saw economic policy.
How do you think Trump world will hear those remarks?
They're not going to like it. But he's making a point that just like Reagan, to keep talking about Ronald Reagan, in 80, Reagan went with George H.W. Bush because he needed not just the movement conservatives to make a real coalition for the Republicans. And so what DeSantis is saying, the Florida governor is saying, Trump just can't have grievance populism be the whole party. He needs to bring in conservatives who are more libertarian leaning like DeSantis in Florida, bring in traditional Republicans like Nikki Haley in her South Carolina coalition. And he's saying he needs to be more expansive in his outreach. He just can't assume everyone's going to turn out for him.
We can't know, you can't know, I can't know if Nikki Haley can make the full 4 weeks of South Carolina. She says she will. In your mind as a reporter, what are the kind of benchmarks you're looking at for the next couple of weeks? Is it crowd size? Is it activity? What kind of things are you going to be sifting through?
Well, the real data point's going to be numbers on money. So she's having fundraisers scheduled in California, New York, Florida, South Carolina, among other states. If she comes out of those fundraisers with single digit to tens of millions of dollars committed to her or her super PAC, that's a sign that she's in it for the long haul because you'll have money. Right. If you're building a national campaign, you need money to build a national campaign. It's not clear yet she has money to build a national campaign. She has money to go on the air in South Carolina, $4 or $5 million here or there. She has money to keep a small campaign staff. But can she build a national campaign to compete with Trump, who has his influence over almost every state party in the country?
You have to move from small to scale very rapidly if you're an insurgent presidential campaign. That's true whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Robert Costa, thank you so very much.
Major.
Nikki Haley is campaigning in South Carolina today following her defeat in the New Hampshire primary yesterday. We will take you to South Carolina next. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. So good to have you with us. Nikki Haley is back in her home state of South Carolina for a campaign rally tonight in Charleston. CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small is there and joins us now. Torian, set the scene for us, please.
Yeah, Major. So after New Hampshire results, Nikki Haley came out and said that she's going home. She said she's coming back here to focus the majority of her efforts in the rest of this race. She's, bucking from what her primary rivals have done so far after disappointing results in the early states. She's deciding to move ahead, investing around $4 million in a TV ad buy across the state. She's putting all of her efforts here because she believes she has a chance. The issue she might face, though, is the fact that Donald Trump is still wildly popular here. I talked to sources within the state Republican Party who tell me that, she has a heavy lift. Donald Trump has done a good job of corralling significant endorsements throughout the state, from the governor, from the U.S. Senator Tim Scott to Representative Nancy Mace. She's, looking at that, staring down this big climb as she comes to her home state. I want to mention some reporting that my colleague Olivia Rinaldi did yesterday. She talked to some Trump staffers at his victory party. They said that because she's not dropping out, they're going to Donald Trump will make the rest of this race for her painful. She's been talking about on the race, Nikki Haley, that is, how she's won 2 statewide races here in South Carolina. The most painful thing for her would be losing in her home state. That appears to be the plan from the Trump campaign.
Torian Small from Charleston, South Carolina. We thank you so very much. Rob Godfrey joins us now. He's a former communications director for then Governor Nikki Haley. Rob, the big meta question. How is it that Nikki Haley in the next 4 weeks can close the gap and possibly win South Carolina?
What she can do is the same thing that she's been doing in Iowa and New Hampshire. look, these early primary states are tailor-made for a candidate like Nikki Haley, who excels in retail politics. At these events that she does, while they may not be have all the hallmarks of the showmanship that the front runners has, what she is doing is she's going to meet and greets. She's going to places that everyday people go, and she's drawing crowds of hundreds of people. She's drawing crowds of thousands of people at some of these places, and she's taking the time to meet every voter, to stay and be the last person there, shake every hand, take every selfie, sign every autograph, answer every question. It's something that she learned as a candidate for the state house. It's something that she perfected as a candidate for governor. And it's something that she's going to have to do to continue to close the gap with President Trump. What she said from the beginning is that she wanted to get stronger in every state. And she got stronger between Iowa and New Hampshire. And now she's going to have to get stronger again from New Hampshire to South Carolina. Make no mistake about it. This is a tall order. The voters of South Carolina are comfortable with President Trump. They've supported him in 3 elections, 2016's primary, 2016's general election, and again in 2020. So not to overplay her odds of winning, she still is going to run as an underdog. And that's a role she relishes, but it's not something she's obviously going to give up on. She's committed to it, and it's going to start with a rally on Wednesday, with a rally tonight in North Charleston.
Rob, I look back at 2016. I covered that campaign in South Carolina. If you combine Trump, Cruz, and Ben Carson, which are all basically the conservative side of the Republican electorate in South Carolina, that's 61% of the turnout in 2016. If you take the Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, John Kasich, which I think would be a stand-in for Nikki Haley's at least beginning constituency, that's 37%. By my math, that's a 24% gap. Is that the gap that Nikki Haley begins with as she tries to close it?
Look, I haven't seen any data yet because, your outlets have not had a chance to do any public polling since New Hampshire polls closed. And what we'll have to do is we'll have to wait and see what the data looks like and what that gap looks like. But she overperformed those expectations, outperformed those expectations in New Hampshire. And she certainly has her work cut out for her in South Carolina. But these are voters that she's coming from. She's coming from a different posture in South Carolina than she did in Iowa and New Hampshire. These are voters who near universally know her. They are voters who have taken a gamble on her twice as governor. The first time when she was an underdog, a role again she relished, a role in which she was a fighter. And these are voters that she's going to feel comfortable talking to, seeing again, and probably sharpening that contrast between herself and the front runner, her opponent, which she's going to have to do to try to peel away, some of these voters who have supported him in previous elections. Campaigns are about contrasts. That doesn't mean they have to necessarily get nasty. South Carolina, of course, has this legendary reputation for nasty politics. At the end of the day, this campaign will sharpen in terms of contrast, because that's what these things. That doesn't mean it's going to be nasty, but it does mean that these candidates are going to have to sharpen those contrasts with each other to get the job done.
Rob, at her event last night, Nikki Haley mentioned the possibility of a debate. Do you think South Carolina Republicans will expect and or demand a debate appearance of former President Trump?
I don't think South Carolina Republicans are any different than the Republicans in the other earlier primary states. Look, South Carolina has a record since 1980, the inception of the debate, of picking presidents. There's no president that's gone on to the White House on the Republican side. No person has gone on to the presidency from the Republican side without winning South Carolina first. Along with that comes the expectation from voters that they get to look these candidates in the eye, see them face to face, and talk to them about issues and hear them debate. The former president has decided not to debate so far. I don't have any indication. I don't think anyone, in certainly the political class or in the media have any indication he's going to change that. Right. But they, like the people in Iowa, would certainly like to see, in Iowa and New Hampshire, like to see more debates and not fewer.
I'd like to ask you about something that Marco Rubio posted on X today, and I was there at the event when Nikki Haley endorsed Marco Rubio's bid for the Republican nomination in 2016. He said Trump is going to be the nominee, and the only question is how much donor money will be wasted in the next 4 weeks. I know there is a relationship there. Some endorsements mean more than others. Factor me the Haley-Rubio relationship as it stands.
Look, Senator Rubio is a good senator. He is someone that Governor Haley was enthusiastic to endorse in 2016, and she's somebody that he's worked with. They've worked with together over the course of the years. You know, at the end of the day, I think there is a prevailing sentiment among, you know, obviously the Washington chattering class that this race is not as close as perhaps Governor Haley sees it as. And so what her objective has to be is to make sure that people stay focused. And when I say people, I mean voters and not elected officials, stay focused on the two-person race that she wants it to be, which is between her and Donald Trump right now, and not have voters focused on the two-person race that the political class is focused on, which is Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And so, look, the campaign's coming to South Carolina, whether the people on the Hill like it or not. And so they're going to have a lot to say about that. But ultimately, the voters are going to have the largest voice that matters in it.
Indeed, they will. Rob Godfrey, thanks so very much.
Thank you very much, Major.
President Biden has been on the campaign trail twice this week, and both times met by protesters. We will discuss that next. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden was waiting for it, and he finally got it. What's that? The endorsement of the United Auto Workers Union. It happened before he addressed the organization's conference, and the president there said that Donald Trump stands against everything the UAW stands for. Let's talk about that and more other things. Joel Payne and Kevin Sheridan join me now at the table. Joel is a CBS News political contributor. Kevin previously served as a spokesperson for the RNC and as a senior advisor to the Romney-Ryan 2012 presidential campaign. Kevin, as the resident Republican at this table, is this race for the Republican nomination in 2024 over, near over, or still open?
I think near over. I think it remains to be seen if Nikki Haley actually goes through with the next 4 weeks of getting pummeled by insults by Donald Trump. It is her home state she's returning to, so that comes with two sides of that coin. If she loses badly and she could be down as much as 30 points, we don't know. We haven't seen the latest polling. Then that's going to be very bad for her political future, obviously. If she closes that gap and she does like she did last night, maybe finishes within 10, then maybe she's got a path forward or an argument to say to her donors that she can go forward. It's going to be really, really, really tough for her, though. She's got no feasible state right now that looks like is in play for her.
After South Carolina.
After South Carolina.
And South Carolina is tough enough, as Anthony and I talked about earlier.
Unless she wins in South Carolina. If she pulls a miracle there, then we'll see.
Joel, what do you make of, and I know that's the laziest question, I apologize profusely for phrasing it that way. Talk to me about what you take away from President Biden's write-in victory last night and where he stands with the UAW endorsement.
I think what it shows is that when it matters, that President Biden knows that his coalition can come together for him. That's pretty impressive in a state like New Hampshire, where he actually burned a lot of bridges by making the change to the primary calendar.
I was talking to Democrats in New Hampshire, and they were none too pleased, but they essentially came down, Joel, with we believe this is a one-off. We're going to be disciplined. We're going to be protective of our first-in-the-nation status, and we will wait to have the conversation again in 2020.
That's exactly right, Major. So, like, you had people who were able to do the math and say, while I'm frustrated about this parochial issue, I understand the fight in front of us to be united against Donald Trump. And I think that's what the president and his team probably take the most heart in from what happened there. I do think, to your question you were asking, Kevin, about is that race on the Republican side over, near over? What matters more than whether we think it's over is that Joe Biden seems to think it's over. His team has already made it very clear that they are focused on Donald Trump in there. I think they're organizing Democrats to really view the race as Biden-Trump rematch.
Kevin, you mentioned something about Nikki Haley's political future. It seems to me she's already decided that she's running in this race. This is her one chance. And the idea of a long-term Republican future has only one answer for her: winning this contest, as hard as that may be, and not calculating in ways like Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott did. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in the current iteration of the Republican Party, you wouldn't see. It's hard to see a Reagan-Bush reconciliation ticket or something like that. The runner-up in Republican presidential primary races generally has a very good chance to become the next candidate. But yeah, this version of the Republican Party, it's going to get really nasty in the next 4 weeks. It's going to get personal. It's going to get insulting. South Carolina is a very tough state too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
relish
rumors.
That kind of
they love it.
Politics. They really do.
And so we're going to see it. I think I think she's ready for it. If you see her not get out, then yeah, I think your calculation's right.
Joel, I want to ask you about something that happened yesterday in Manassas, Virginia, and today. Both events, these are key constituencies and big profile messaging events for the President of the United States, interrupted repeatedly over the President's posture on Israel and the war against Hamas in Gaza. This is now becoming a public part of the conversation. How potentially damaging is it?
Look, it's obviously what you wouldn't want. It's not preferable. Emotions are high on this, and I would say rightfully so. It's really upsetting, the scenes that we see from what's happening in Gaza. I think that what the Biden folks are going to do, and I think it's like this with every other issue, it's contrast. The only way that President Biden wins this discussion is if he puts this as a contrast frame. You might not like how I've handled the situation in Gaza. You might not like whether or not I've done everything perfect by your, progressive whims, but there's a guy who's trying to come back to the White House who is going to pour lighter fluid on the situation. It's going to make it worse, and that's what they're going to do.
Do you think there is something that the campaign of the White House affirmatively ought to do? Because many of these are young progressives, and one of the constant themes of their lives is, I want to be heard. Yeah. Do you think the campaign of the White House should do something to indicate that they're being heard, brought in, conversed with, something they haven't done yet?
I think that is happening both behind the scenes and out front. The president actually lately, if you just look at some of the reporting, has been more willing to put some distance between himself and Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli government. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if you saw even more space between what the president's position is and what the more pro-Israel position is.
I know you want to jump in.
Let's not forget where the Democratic National Convention is this year, Chicago. These protests have a very good chance of spinning out of control. And you could see a 1968 on the streets. I mean, these people are mad. They're going to organize. They're going to be there. All conventions have gotten crazy with Antifa on the streets, with just mass protests. I could see if Israel is still involved in Hamas, in Gaza, that could be
just think about how mad they're going to be when they hear what Donald Trump wants to do in the Middle East.
Joel Payne, Kevin Sheridan, thank you so very much for your time. Always great to have you here at the table. That does it for today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. That's very good news. And of course, here's a quick reminder, something you already know. You're streaming CBS News.